Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. Today I am going to discuss a new topic for the PG course in Environmental Sciences, that is transport processes in atmosphere. In this module, we are going to talk about different types of forces responsible for transport of mass, momentum and energy, then various types of horizontal and vertical transport processes, and lastly various scale atmospheric transport processes involved to move air pollutants in different layers of atmosphere and intercontinental transport of air pollutants. Let us start with introduction. The exchange of movement of mass, momentum at heat between the system and environment is normally termed as transport phenomena. The mass, heat and momentum transfer are often assumed in the simple principle that sum total of the quantities being studied must be conserved by the system and its environment. Thus, the different phenomena that lead to transport are each considered individually with the knowledge that the sum of their contributions must equal to 0. In physics, transport phenomena are all irreversible processes of statistical nature stemming from random continuous motion of molecules mostly observed in fluids. Almost all physical phenomena ultimately involve systems seeking their lowest energy state in keeping with the principle of minimum energy. As they approach this state, they tend to achieve true thermodynamic equilibrium, at which point there are no longer any driving forces in the system and transport ceases. The various aspects of such equilibrium are directly connected to a specific transport, as for example, the heat transfer referred to achieve thermal equilibrium with its environment, whereas mass and momentum transport move the system towards chemical and mechanical equilibrium respectively. Transport processes include heat conduction implying energy transferred, fluid flow indicates momentum transfer and molecular diffusion refers to mass transfer. The transport of mass, energy and momentum can be affected by the presence of external sources. Some examples are: an odor dissipates more slowly when the source of the odor remains present. The rate of cooling of a solid that is conducting heat depends on whether a heat source is applied, and the gravitational force acting on a raindrop counteracts the resistance or drag imparted by the surrounding air. The mass, momentum and energy can be transported by the process of diffusion. The molecular transfer equations of Newton's law for fluid momentum, Fourier's law for heat and Fick's law for mass are very similar. One can convert from one transfer coefficient to another in order to compare all three different transport phenomena. In fluid systems described in terms of temperature, matter density and pressure, it is known as that temperature differences lead to heat flows from the warmer to the cooler parts of the system. Similarly, pressure differences will lead to matter flow from high pressure to low pressure. When both pressures and temperature vary, temperature differences at constant pressure can cause matter flow, and pressure differences at constant temperature can cause heat flow. Perhaps surprisingly, the heat flow per unit of pressure difference and the density flow per unit of temperature difference are equal. Transport phenomena have wide applications in many branches of science. In the present note, we are concentration on atmospheric transport processes. Now come to transport processes. First one is horizontal transport. The horizontal transport of the atmosphere involves a balance between the pressure gradient force and the Coriolis force. The resulting steady flow is called the geostrophic flow. Below 1 kilometer altitude, the horizontal flow is modified by friction with the surface. All these basic flows, including the forces, are discussed in upcoming slides. Now, geostrophic flow. Large scale movement of air in the atmosphere is driven by horizontal pressure gradients originating from differential heating of the earth's surfaces. As air moves from high to low pressure on the surface of the rotating earth, the Coriolis force deflects it. Now comes to Coriolis force. An object moving horizontally in any direction on the surface of the earth experiences a Coriolis force perpendicular to the direction of motion, to the right in the northern hemisphere and to the left in the southern hemisphere. Convince yourself that the Coriolis force in the southern hemisphere indeed acts to deflect moving objects to the left. Now comes to geostrophic balance. A pressure gradient in the atmosphere generates a pressure gradient force oriented along the gradient from high to low pressure. Now see the figure 1, which is in left side. Consider an air parcel initially at rest in a pressure gradient field in the northern hemisphere. There is no Coriolis force applied to the air parcel since it is at rest. Under the effect of the pressure gradient force, the air parcel begins to flow along the gradient from high to low pressure, that is perpendicular to the isobars, that is lines of constant pressures. As the air parcel acquires speed, the increasing Coriolis acceleration causes it to curve to the right. Eventually, equilibrium is reached when the Coriolis force balances the pressure gradient force, resulting in a steady flow, that is zero acceleration. This steady flow is called the geostrophic flow. It must be parallel to the isobar, as only then is the Coriolis force exerted in the direction directly opposite of the pressure gradient force, that is seen in figure 1. In the northern hemisphere, geostrophic flow is such that the higher pressure is to the right of the flow. Air flows clockwise around a center of high pressure and counterclockwise around a center of low pressure. See in figure 2, the direction of flow is reversed in the southern hemisphere. A center of high pressure is called an anticyclone or simply a high. A center of low pressure is called a cyclone or simply a low. Now come to effect of friction. Near the surface of the earth, an additional horizontal force exerted on the atmosphere is the friction force. As air travels near the surface, it loses momentum to obstacles such as trees, buildings or ocean waves. The friction acceleration representing the loss of momentum is exerted in the direction opposite to the direction of motion. The resulting slowdown of the flow decreases the Coriolis acceleration, so that the air is deflected towards the region of low pressure. This effect is illustrated by the triangle of forces in figure 3. The flow around a region of high pressure is deflected away from the high, while the flow around a region of low pressure is deflected towards the low. This result is the same in both hemispheres. In a high pressure region, sinking motions are required to compensate for the divergence of air at the surface, shown in figure 4. As air sinks, it heats up by compression, relative humidity goes down, leading to sunny and dry conditions. By contrast, in a low pressure region, convergence of air near the surface causes the air to rise, that is shown in figure 4. As the air rises, it cools by expansion, its relative humidity increases and clouds and rains may result. Thus, high pressure is generally associated with fair weather and low pressure with poor weather in both hemispheres. Now come to vertical transport. So far, we have described the circulation of the atmosphere as determined by the balance between horizontal forces. Horizontal convergence and divergence of air in general circulation induce vertical motion, but the associated vertical wind speed are only in the range is 0.001 to 0.01 meter per second compared to 1 to 10 meter per second for typical horizontal wind speed. The resulting time scale for vertical transport from the surface to the tropopause is about 3 months. Faster vertical transport can take place by locally driven buoyancy. Now come to buoyancy. Consider an object of density r and volume V immersed in a fluid, that is gas or liquid, of density r dash, that is described in figure 5. The fluid pressure exerted on top of the object is less than that exerted on the bottom. The resulting pressure gradient force pushes the object upward, counteracting the downward force, that the RVG exerted on the object by gravity. The net force exerted on the object representing the difference between the pressure gradient force and gravity is called the buoyancy. Buoyancy is in the atmosphere is determined by the vertical gradient of temperature. In an unstable atmosphere, buoyancy accelerates both upward and downward motion. There is no preferred direction of motion. Now comes to turbulence. Whereas buoyancy sets in vertical motion in the atmosphere, the rates of vertical transport is quantified through the process of turbulence, which is the main feature of micro scale circulations in the atmosphere. There are two limiting regimes for fluid flow, that is laminar and turbulent. Laminar flow is smooth and steady, whereas turbulent flow is irregular and fluctuating. One finds empirically that whether a flow is laminar or turbulent depends on its Reynolds number, that is a dimensionless entity. The transition from laminar or to turbulent flow takes place at Reynolds number in the range, that is 1000 to 10,000. Flows in the atmosphere are generally turbulent because the values of relevant components of Reynolds number. Turbulence is important in pollution transport because it can thoroughly mix the air and its pollutants. A well mixed layer is characterized by vertically uniform concentration of pollutants, water vapor and potential temperature. The depth of the mixed layer is denoted as the planetary boundary layer, that is PBL. There are two major categories of surface based turbulence. Mechanically induced turbulence occurs when the prevailing horizontal wind is disrupted by a rough surface. Thermally induced turbulence occurs when the temperature lapse rate is large, producing a relatively unstable surface layer and causing the unevenly heated surface to produce pockets of ascent and descent. Since over land both the prevailing wind speed and temperature lapse rate are typically strongest during the day, mixing is generally stronger during the day than the night. Therefore, the height of the mixed layer also varies diurnally. There is much less diurnal variation over water. Now comes to time scale for vertical transport. The turbulent diffusion parameterization of turbulence can be used to estimate time scales for vertical transport in the troposphere, that is illustrated in figure 6. We wish to know the mean time dt required by an air molecule to travel a vertical distance, that is dz. Einstein equation for molecular diffusion derived from Fick's law gives by equation 3, whereas dx is the distance travelled in any direction over time, that is dt. Molecular diffusion is isotropic within the context of the turbulent diffusion and parameterization. We can apply the Einstein equation to vertical turbulent motion in the atmosphere, replacing by dx by dz and d by kz, and this gives equation 4. A mean value for kz in the troposphere is about 2 into 10 to the power 5 centimeter square per second. It takes on average about 1 month for air to mix vertically from the surface to tropopause. dz is equal to 10 kilometer. Species with lifetimes longer than a month tend to be well mixed vertically in the troposphere, while species with shorter lifetimes show large vertical gradients. Exchange of air between the troposphere and the stratosphere is considerably slower than mixing the troposphere because of the temperature inversion in the stratosphere. It takes 5 to 10 years for air from the troposphere to be transported up to the stratosphere and 1 to 2 years for air from stratosphere to be transported down in the troposphere. Air is transported from the troposphere to the stratosphere principally in the tropics and is returned from the stratosphere to the troposphere principally at mid latitudes, but the mechanism involved are still not well understood. Various scale atmospheric transport processes and air pollutants. The movement of pollutants in the atmosphere is caused by transport, dispersion and deposition. Transport is movement caused by a time averaged wind flow. Dispersion results from local turbulence, that is motion that lasts less than the time used to average the transport. It has been realized for many years that local and regional air quality are often substantially affected by human activities. Recently, there has been a growing appreciation that industrial and agricultural activities are contributing to significant modifications of the atmosphere not only in the vicinity of pollution sources, but on a global scale. The best known example of such a global effect is the increasing concentration of carbon dioxide caused primarily by fossil fuel burning. Carbon dioxide and other trace gases that are efficient absorbers in the infrared are important contributors to the so-called greenhouse effect. The increases projected in the global concentration of such substances will lead to an increase in the infrared opacity of the atmosphere. The resulting increase in the flux of radiation from atmosphere to the surface is expected to have a significant effect on surface temperatures in the next century. Although carbon dioxide is chemically inert in the troposphere and stratosphere and is fairly uniformly mixed, a number of other radiatively important trace gases such as methane, ozone and the chlorofluorocarbons undergo chemical transformation in the atmosphere that can be strongly dependent on location and time. The concentration of such tracers thus tend to become highly variable unless the time scale for chemically change is very short compared to time scales. Characteristics of meteorological systems, their distributions are strongly affected by atmospheric motions. Thus, to understand the implications of 10 in globally significant trace species, it is necessary to consider their sources, sinks and chemical transformation within the atmosphere, but also their transport by the winds. Once an air pollutant is released into the atmosphere, chemical, microphysical and meteorological factors determine how it is distributed. The location of air pollution sources with respect to local, regional and global air circulation pattern influences how efficiently pollutants are transported and dispersed. The winds transport air both horizontally and vertically. Vertical transport is important when considering long range pollutant transport because pollutants distributed to higher altitudes usually encounter stronger winds that provide a rapid transport to distant locations. Atmospheric stability, controlled by how temperature varies with height, determines whether vertical transport will be slow or rapid. After emission, pollutants may undergo chemical transformation, be subjected to depletion processes such as particle scavenging and dry or wet deposition, or mix into the atmosphere to become a component of the background concentration. This session provides a general description of the atmosphere and a synopsis of air circulation and weather patterns that influence the distribution of air pollutants. The major atmospheric transport processes are atmospheric advection and turbulent diffusion. Atmospheric transport processes are conveniently divided between those processes that involve bulk motion of the atmosphere, referred to as advection by meteorologists, and those processes that may be characterized as turbulent or diffusive in nature. In the case of point sources such as power plant plumes, the distinction is quite clear. Advection moves the center of mass of the plume along the direction of the average wind, while turbulent diffusion disperses the plume in the plane orthogonal to the average wind. On a global scale, distinction between advective and diffusive process is not always clear, since the atmosphere is characterized by spatially and temporally varying motion with a wide range of scales. There is no obvious physical separation between mean and turbulent motion. In practice, those transport processes that are explicitly resolved by the particular observational network or transport model being utilized are often regarded as the advective motion, while the remaining unresolved motion. Now comes to global circulation. The global scale general circulation of winds can be considered the multi-layer seasonal average of the daily winds. Global circulation plays very important role in producing long range transport. Winds in the middle latitude troposphere are mostly from the west, that is zonal flow, causing most intercontinental transport to be from west to east. The north-south component of the wind in the middle and upper troposphere is usually much weaker than the zonal component. The zonal and meridional components can have similar magnitudes near the surface. Wind speeds are generally stronger during winter than summer, causing more rapid transport during the winter months. Areas of rising air tend to be smaller and shorter lived than areas of subsidence, which generally cover larger area and persist longer. Now comes to synoptic scale. Synoptic circulation features have sizes of about 1 to 2000 kilometers and lifetimes of several days to a week. Transient middle latitude cyclones, that is lows, and anticyclones, that is high, are prime examples of these circulations. Anticyclones generally are regions of tranquil weather that with sinking air that leads to relatively cloud free skies and stable conditions that suppresses mixing and tend to trap pollutants. Their light winds also reduce horizontal transport. Anticyclones with little forward motion allow these stagnating conditions to persist over days or even weeks. Now comes to mesoscale systems. Mesoscale weather systems have typical size of a few hundred kilometers and lifetimes ranging from a few hours to a day. Important examples associated with pollutant transport are thunderstorms, land and sea circulations, and mountains or valley breezes. These circulations either can be superimposed on the larger scale transient systems or they can occur alone. Thunderstorms occur frequently over many parts of the world, ranging from isolated cells to organized clusters called mesoscale convective systems, that is MCS. The base of thunderstorms typically are about 1.5 km above the surface, while the tops of non-severe isolated cells or disorganized clusters extend to near the local tropopause. Updrafts and downdrafts are generally less than 10 meter per second. These storms can rapidly move boundary layer pollutants to the upper troposphere, where they can be transported great distances by the stronger horizontal winds aloft. Conversely, the downdrafts that occur during the mature and dissipating stages of a storm transport upper tropospheric air to the surface. Non-severe storms can be associated with cyclones and frontal systems or be embedded within homogeneous synoptic air masses. Sea and land breezes, mountain and valley circulations are important sources of mesoscale transport in all three dimensions. There are examples of diurnally varying mesoscale thermal circulations. The land breeze is usually much weaker than the sea breeze. Sea and land breezes can transport coastal emissions offshore during the day and onshore during the night. In mountain valley situations, the mountains acts as elevated heat sources during the day, causing air and its pollutants to rise up along the slope. At night, the horizontal temperature gradient reverses, and this, aided by the force of gravity, results in downslope flow of pollutants and its accumulation in the nearby valley. Now, come to distribution of air pollutants into the atmosphere. Once air pollutant is released into the atmosphere, chemical, microphysical and meteorological factors determine how it is distributed. The location of air pollution sources with respect to local, regional and global air circulation patterns influences how efficiently pollutants are transported and dispersed. The winds transport air both horizontally and vertically. Role of vertical layers of atmosphere and jet streams. Pollutant transport occurs in the lowest two layers of the atmosphere, the troposphere and stratosphere. Most weather phenomena that affect pollutant transport occur in the troposphere, which extends from the surface to about 18 km in the tropics and about 8 km near the poles, that is described in figure 7, which is placed in next slide. Instead, there are two climatologically occurring breaks in each hemisphere, one containing the subtropical jet stream, that is near 30° north and the other containing the polar jet stream, that is near 45° north. These jet streams are not stagnant in location, but shift with season, moving closer to the equator in winter and more poleward during summer. The jet streams are important distributor of air pollutants for two reasons. They create major areas of air exchange between the troposphere and stratosphere, and the strong winds of the jet stream can rapidly transport pollutants. For example, if one assumes an average wind speed of 35 meter per second at 40° latitude, an eastward moving air parcel will circumnavigate the globe in only 10 days. The stratosphere, which extends to 50 km, has regions of strong winds, but virtually no turbulent mixing except for occasional overshooting of thunderstorms, certain types of lightning and occasional thin clouds. The atmosphere's vertical temperature profile actually determines how quickly an air pollutant will be dispersed upward from its points of emission. Conditions are those near the surface on a sunny day are associated with atmospheric instability and turbulence. On the contrary, situations like cold, windless night denote stability that suppresses vertical motion. Layers containing temperature inversions are very stable, greatly inhibiting vertical transport and promoting the accumulation of pollutants. The stratosphere is a permanently stable region with a near zero lapse rate between 11 and 20 km and increasingly negative lapse rate above. As a result, pollutants injected into the stratosphere tend to remain there for much longer period than the troposphere, An important characteristics of free tropospheric air movement is that air parcels experiencing no exchange of heat energy conserve their potential temperature and thus move along surfaces of constant potential temperature. Exceptions are regions of cloud cover where radiative processes and water vapor phase changes can be major sources or sinks of heat. In addition, air parcels in the surface boundary layer undergo temperature changes due to exchanges of radiation with Earth's surface. Isentropic surface slope upward toward the north with isentropic values increasing vertically. As a result, poleward moving air conserving its potential temperature tends to ascend while equatorward moving air tends to sink. This concept has an application for pollution transport into the Arctic, specifically pollution laden parcels beginning at low altitude and heading north that conserve their potential temperature will ascend to the middle troposphere. Conversely, for low level parcel to remain near the surface during northward excursion, they either must be very cold initially or undergo considerable loss of heat due to passing over ice covered surfaces, especially during the long polar winter season. Northern Eurasia is sufficiently cold than that its pollutants can be transported quasi-horizontally to the Arctic, making it a major source of Arctic pollution during winter. This figure depicts cross section from the equator to the north pole showing three circulation cells, that is the tropopause, the polar and the subtropical jet streams. To summarize this session, we can say that many meteorological phenomena on a variety of spatial and temporal scales transport surfaces pollutants out of the boundary layer and into the free troposphere. Examples include thunderstorms, turbulence, sea breezes and the warm conveyor belts, that is WCBs of the cyclone. Advection is the most important mechanism for transporting tracer to the free troposphere, and the addition of upright convection and turbulent mixing increases the amount significantly. Convection and turbulent mixing are not linearly additive processes, therefore, it is important to represent all such processes in meteorological modeling studies. Generally, the long-range intercontinental transport of pollutants can be considered a two-step process. Firstly, the pollutants must be transported vertically out of the boundary layer, whereas winds are relatively light, and into the free troposphere where winds are stronger, especially near the jet stream. Once the free troposphere, the pollutants are transported quasi-horizontally by larger wind systems such as the prevailing westerlies. The strength of the winds determines how rapidly the transport will occur, and there can be considerable mixing with the stratospheric air above and troposphere. Dear students, hope this session would have given you an insight into the topic. Thank you and bye for now.